Welcome to Rise Over Run. This is Piers Dormeyer. Today, back in Atlanta, talking to, I believe, the Win the Storm vendor rep of the year.
Runner up, man. I got it. It was Carver, man.
In that case, we're not going to do this. We want to cut this. We're with Stanley Bastek.
Okay, we can shout out Michael Carver. Great dude. Deserves
yeah. I was totally setting you up. We love Michael too, and Lenzer for that matter, because I knew you were up against him too. With Stan Bastek, Stan's well known, probably I would say the face of A.S.S, maybe, at least as far as I see. You've seen him in the Money Suit. You've likely seen him at the A.S.S roadshows. He had a bitchin', what was that, a 1951 Chevy truck that you were giving away a couple years ago.
That was beautiful old red Chevy. Was everybody's envy. We were all hoping to win it, and it's funny, all the A.S.S folks are like, how can you guys bring this thing all around and we don't have a chance to win this thing? So
dude, I totally want to get back to the truck, because I was kind of thinking about the truck from the perspective of, if you've been traveling around with a beautiful vehicle like that for so long and you've been kind of looking at it and you're like, and then you give it away.
Yeah.
And who'd you give it away to, by the way?
We gave it away to a contractor in Georgia, actually. So DKS Roofing here in Georgia, and couldn't have been a more deserving guy. David Smith, he was just awesome. Couldn't have been a better recipient of the truck. But you're to that point, you do feel like you're giving something you own away, even though the company bought this vehicle for a promotion, and like you have a little sense of ownership over this thing. It was definitely very bittersweet to see that thing go away.
Well, knowing that it's in Georgia, even more so. I mean, I was thinking about this. I was comparing it to, if you've ever, sold a house in your town that you might have lived in the house for a little while, and then, it's half an hour away, and you happen to be down in that side of town. You're going to IKEA or some such crap, and you swing by the house, and you're like, the lawn kind of looks like crap. Or whatever. I mean, I'd be driving by that truck, and if I could tell there was the oil leaking, I'd be like pissed off about it. You know what I mean? But I guess maybe you don't have those problems, or you don't have.
No, we do. It's funny. Every time we are in Roswell, Georgia, we drive by our old house, and my wife and I do the exact same thing. We're like, oh wow, that's interesting. They cut that away. Oh, they left that up at least. So I think we all do that. Human nature is we maintain that sense of possession over things that. We've got emotional ties too.
Without a doubt. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go this way. Anyhow, well, give us a little bit more. How'd you get into the business, Stan? Where'd you come from? What's your story? I always start out this way because there's always usually a pretty good one.
Well, there's a lot of ways I could go with that. Yeah. How'd I get into business? What's my story? Where am I from? I'm a military kid, so I really didn't have much exposure to construction, roofing, certainly not, I mean, I knew what a roof was. This is that typical response from a lot of people in our industry. And then you have a lot of people that are generational construction folks too. But I grew up as a Coast Guard kid, so we moved every few years growing up. I lived all over the Midwest and up and down the Eastern Seaboard. I was born in L.A., as they say, Lower Alabama. So not the same L.A. a lot of people think of, but Mobile, Alabama. And then lived in New York City for a while as a kid, which was like, mind-blowing experience to be in New York City as a first, second, third grader. Lived in Jersey, lived in Duluth, Minnesota, way up there in the frozen tundra. And then lived in Michigan, which is where I went to high school and college in Michigan. So lived all around. My wife and I, my girlfriend at the time, Colleen, she and I, we're really trying to figure out like what's next, where do we go? And it was sort of, okay, who's going to find a job first in Atlanta or Phoenix? I think were the two places we were looking. And she ended up getting a job in Atlanta. And I was just bartending. We were both bartenders all through college. So my true training in my career was behind a bar for 5 years, and doing bartending, which I still have fond memories. So I try to rebuild my bar experience back here as much as I can. So we play bartender on Friday night.
You know what? There's behind a great salesperson, half the time it's a bartender. I mean, I did the same. I did the same thing. That that Michigan crew is powerful, though. I'll say that.
Yeah, we've had a rough run in sports lately, or at least football. But it's a really cool place. I mean, Ann Arbor, it was the first time I lived on my own, right? I think a lot of people you put yourself back in your shoes as a college kid, as an 18-year-old moving out on your own and going to most college campuses. You're going to have a really crazy, mind-blowing, open your mind to different ideas and different things experience. But I think it was accelerated for me when I started working in the service industry, because it is you get exposed to so many different people, different perspectives. And, it's not only really fun and, a lot of partying, a lot of having a great time, but also you just, it couldn't be a better crash course in how to deal with different personalities, both people you work with and also, from a customer perspective. And it was a bar that wasn't just sort of a, campus, dive for students. It really, you got all walks of life, the townies, as we call it, as well as, people, that were coming in, students and stuff. So I love that. But I left Ann Arbor with Colleen in 2005, I want to say. And we had big visions of going and traveling overseas. And so we spent 3 months backpacking all over Southeast Asia, which you hear a lot of people go backpack over in Europe and do things like that. But we went in a different direction. We went and bought round trip tickets in and out of Singapore and spent 3 months just figuring it out with a Lonely Planet book. And, we always reminisce about that time, our little Lonely Planet Bible, and where are we going to go next, wherever the wind blows, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it was great. And we got back, and like I was saying earlier, we were trying to figure out where are we going to go, right? What are we going to do afterwards? And so we decided between either Atlanta and Phoenix, and she got a job down in Atlanta, and the rest is history. We moved down there, and I started bartending down there. And, that's where I ended up sort of finding a connection to get into A.S.S as a temp. And I started at A.S.S while I was bartending at a place in downtown Atlanta called Atkins Park Bar and Grill. So I'm like, I told my parents, I'm going to take this great Michigan education and I'm just going to bartend for the next couple of years. It's good money. I can't imagine myself doing anything else. And my parents are like, bullshit.
I used to be able to walk from my place in Atlanta to Atkins Park.
Oh, that's fun.
The place up the street, hand in hand. For you guys that are from Atlanta, know it. I was there so much when I was in my mid-20s that I'd get a call from the bartender, and he'd be like, "Man, we haven't seen you in a few days. Are you gonna come by? We're gonna have to let a girl go or something, And just be like, "Oh, I gotta get up there and do my thing." I don't know if that's a good thing, but yeah, no, so you're kind of a hippie. A little bit. Southeast Asia hippie, kind of running around 3 months, just like, we'll figure it out, go bartend, it's like.
We were adventurous in spirit. I can't claim to be Mr. World Traveler. It was really taking, inspiration from my wife, who had, Colleen at that time had already been to China twice. She'd been to Cambodia. She'd been all over Europe. She'd been to Central America. So I'm like, I meet this girl and we date for a few years, and then we get close to graduation and she's like Miss World Traveler. And I'm like, we got to go, And so
you got to catch up. Yeah. You got nothing to add on those conversations.
Exactly right. My first trip overseas was with her on that flight, flying from Detroit to Tokyo, from then Tokyo to Singapore. It was life-changing, to say the least.
Everybody should do that in Asia. Southeast Asia is a great place to go and get your feet wet. I went to Thailand sometime in 05, 06, 07, somewhere in that range. Had this idea. I was boxing a lot at the time. I was working out of a gym in Atlanta, and I had this idea that I was going to go train Muay Thai in Thailand just maybe for a couple weeks. And there's a lot of Americans that go do that. And I think on the first or second day, it's a pretty brutal experience. But I think when I was checking some 7 or 8 year olds' leg kicks, and I was literally like tearing up every time, I decided that was going to go from like an extreme sports kind of training sort of vacation to a straight up drinking Coronas on a beach in Phuket type of experience. And that's pretty much where all my all my dreams of becoming a Muay Thai phenom have kind of evaporated and just went back to
Yeah,
loafing.
that's no joke, man. And they start them really early over there. It's like, organized sports in the U.S., man. They get those guys into Muay Thai very early. So yeah.
Hardcore. Um, awesome. So you go in. You're a temp. You get into Atlas. You know basically that the granules go up, granule side up, nail on the line.
Yeah, interestingly, I actually, when I got hired by our vice president of our installation group at the time, a guy by the name of Tom Rowe, who was the one that hired me, and basically to come in and do administrative work, and he was over our polyiso group. So I had more exposure probably in the first year and a half of my entry into construction on the installation side, which was really interesting. It's very spec driven, and it's very it's all about different product grades and thicknesses. You could say it's more commoditized, but it's also very technical, right? And that was interesting to sort of get that experience from him, and couldn't be a better guy to sort of start your career with. He's since retired, but I really realized pretty quickly going into a corporate environment, as a guy who really, again, had this misconception that he was going to bartend forever. Some people do that, which is fine, but I'm like, yeah, this is nice. This is nice to see a lot of different paths and a lot of different options. And, oh, by the way, there's a chance to make some money and build a career here, right? And there's I think, I got exposed to a corporate office is my first exposure to sort of corporate America and to the construction world. And that experience really allowed me to see everything that you could do. I think a lot of people come up through a sales path, perhaps, right? And maybe you never get to see that corporate perspective. In fact, corporate might seem like the place I never want to go. But for me, it was like home. It was always something I looked at and said, this is where decisions are made. This is where you can really make an impact directly on sort of the course and the direction of the business. And when I came into Atlas, it was sort of that period of time where the industry was going through a little bit of a technology revolution, so to speak. We were, seeing how technology was starting to play a bigger role in business in general. And I think construction was a little bit of a laggard in that. So there was a lot of opportunity to implement things and bring ideas that, were immediately accessible, immediately things that we could sort of do to improve the business. And I had a natural affinity to sort of go towards marketing. And I remember going into our president's office and, really probably at the encouragement of a couple of people who saw that there was an opening in marketing and said, hey, I want to apply for that job. I've been here for, 4 or 5 months and in this temp role, and I'd really like to be here long term. And he gave me some really, really good advice, like at the onset of my career at Atlas, which was, so Ken Farish, our president, who's still our president today, he said, Stan, do the best possible job you can at the job you've been given, right? And, try to look at it a little bit bigger than what the responsibilities you've been given. And don't worry about the next job. The next job will come, because you get recognized, and we'll help you build a path. But don't worry about the next job. Focus really, really hard on what you're doing, and things will work out for you. And I've really tried to take that to heart in my whole career at Atlas, and it's been really, really good. So
I think that's outstanding advice. I've heard it a different way as well. It's that whole, okay, so you hate your job, get really good at it. Like that's the best insurance policy for not having that job. Get really good at the job you hate, and it'll all work out. That's great. It's great advice. Yeah. So did that marketing, you landed in kind of evolved into this marketing path, and you have a very unique style out there, and unique in a good way, not bless your heart, Stan, kind of way. But
they broke the mold, honey.
Yeah, it's just that's great for you. No, how did all that evolve?
I was really, really lucky to sort of get into a marketing path because it allowed me to express creativity, which I think we're surrounded by a lot of really great creative people, but I always really wanted to be able to flex that creative muscle. And the shingle was a shingle, right, is still a phrase I hear today. But back then that was the phrase, right? Like we're selling weathered wood shingles, and our differentiator at the time, not knocking the strategy, but this was the industry we were in at the time. You remember from your days, at Elk, we had a 35-year warranty laminate and everybody else had a 30-year laminate, right? And, it was very pricing focused and it was very commoditized, right? And I think what we really were able to do is say, how can we start telling stories in a different way and empowering contractors to tell stories? There was a marked pivot right around the time that I was getting into A.S.S. of being super pull strategy focused push strategy focused and pivoting to a pull strategy focus. And I think that was happening in the industry, but we really tried to do that very early when we noticed that this was going to affect our business in a positive way, to build relationships with contractors. And if we can be the contractor's choice, right? If we can be the company that, from a marketing perspective, from a culture perspective, from a product perspective, contractors said, I like what they're doing, I want to do more business with them, we're probably going to be setting ourselves up for success and be more valuable to distribution. So all of those things I think were really great. And being in marketing, we were able to start doing videos and we were able to start putting POP materials in place that we hadn't really done before. We started looking at contractor programs, right? We launched our first contractor program and we had the A.S.S. Signature Select Warranty, which at that time had a very bad acronym that, a couple of, sales reps, said, oh, that's that ass warranty, right? Okay. Yeah, I sold my quota. I got my 5 warranties for the quarter, right? But we looked at that and
I
said,
sold
okay.
my ass off.
Exactly. I will never forget the sales guy that told me that. And I'm like sitting here trying to just put these programs together. And we're like talking to my boss about it. And he's like, you know what, just don't be deterred, man. Like stay laser focused on the goal. And now it's a legit program that we built it into over many years. But, those early days we're able to be flexing our creativity, but also sort of, trying to, respect where we came from and pull guys along to a certain degree as well. So it was a lot of fun. I love marketing. I had my boss at the time, his name's Rick Galacka. He I think is his great advice for anybody in a management or leadership role. If you want to be really successful, allow people that are really good at things maybe you're not as inclined to be good at, or don't want to be, to shine, right? And he really allowed me to go and be the star in a lot of things from a marketing perspective, and didn't have a big ego about it. And it benefited me and it benefited us as a company. So I think I've tried to take that in management too, is surround yourself with people that complement, the company and complement your department in ways that, bringing skills into your team that you don't necessarily have, and then let them be the star. Give them the opportunity to go own those things in a way. And that sense of ownership I got, really, was in a lot of ways given, right? There's some people that could sort of stifle you and, take your ideas. And, I think that probably happens at a lot of companies. I was just really fortunate to be surrounded by so many really good people and mentors. So.
Yeah, I'm also similarly fortunate as well. It's, I think it makes all the difference in the world. And it's super funny how you say that. Like you can be marketing and so brand focused, and all of a sudden, something like A.S.S. comes out of your warranty name. It goes back. I just was thinking about it when, GAF purchased Elk back in 2006 or 7 or whenever it was. It was the strategy was this GAF and then Elk. Do you remember that? It was the red box, and then it was the green Elk. Yeah. And for the next 2 years, it was, go elk yourself, and it was like constant, but
oh my gosh,
God love it.
But you got to own those things. I think that's key, right? Your brand is not, it's a combination of things, right? Everybody's seen the charts, right? The intersection of your brand is what you want it to be and what other people perceive it to be, right? Like that's what's really happening. And so the goal is to get the people that see it in a certain way, to, not be offended by it, but to own it, right? And then figure out, how do you move it forward, right? And so I think, whoever's watching this, I think if you are responsible for a brand, if you're responsible for people, you have to listen to what they're saying. You have to listen to what people feel about your company, right? So if you're a contractor, what do people feel about, the product and the service that you're putting out? And then what is your messaging, and are they aligned, right? And if they're not, try to move them closer to the center, because I think that's when things start to really click.
Yeah, and absolutely. And unrelated, it'll be interesting to see how Corona Extra comes out of this mess and how they play that. Because
Yeah.
good luck with that one. So knowing you've spent so much time in your career and over the last couple of years with the road shows and everything else, you've really had a ton of focus on educating contractors and making them better business people. And ultimately, I think, going right back to your kind of philosophy that if we educate them and we create the right kind of culture and the right kind of, and we obviously deliver great products, then they're going to reward us with their business. But from your perspective, if you had, being a marketer or a sales leader, if you had an extra $1 million worth of budget, right, to go out there and drive change in these areas, what would you do with it?
That's a really
tough one. You could buy a yacht.
Yeah, we'll buy the Atlas yacht. There you go.
Yeah.
I'll answer that in a couple ways. I think, budget is, a really, really, not scrutinized, not the right word, but, we're a privately held company. We're a company that, expects its people to be fiscally responsible. You have to justify things around here. We certainly don't have the marketing budget of some of our competitors, which is fine. You deal with that. But I think we definitely put a value on relationships and feet on the street, right? So my gut reaction is, well, heck, I'd probably go hire a few more salespeople, right, to expand our ability to go do that. I think that's the sales mind in me, is saying, there's areas, gosh, where I know we could probably make a bigger impact if we could, add people. And I think, revenue generation is that's the life source of our of any business, right? If and we were talking about this right before we started recording, is like, this idea of being able to get back out and make personal connection, I think, is when we'll sort of feel the engine turn back on in our industry, right? I think we've all managed through this, but having more really quality people on the street to go help build the relationships is probably where I would go first, right? In investing. But if it was all sort of allocated to marketing, right? How would I use that from a marketing perspective? I really believe I'd build a couple of, again, amazing, fun, interesting promotions, and probably, build some souped up trailer and take the story on the road and hire somebody to haul the thing around and go give presentations all around the country. Because I think that, we do a lot of training. We go and we rent out a ballroom, or we go to a ballpark and we do these big events, and it has a big impact. But I think that what we've also found is that smaller group training, that come to you as opposed to you come to us training, is really valuable. So I've always really loved the idea of coming up with a sort of like mobile training, mobile implementation sort of thing. And some others have done that for sure. And, I've seen those things around. I've seen, I want to say it's, is it A.S.S that has their big trailer, or somebody has a big trailer they bring around. But I think those things are highly effective because, again, you're going to where your customers are, right? And I think that's also sort of showing them that, their time is valuable. We're going to come to you, and if this is valuable, hang out. So I'd love to do that at some point. We've been talking about it for, probably 10 years of building out a trailer. It's just that the implementation's challenging for a manufacturer to do that and make that investment, right? With everything else you could be doing with that time. But
yeah, I often try to think through that in terms of the industry itself, and driving. I wouldn't say it's not necessarily driving more professionalism, because I think there's plenty of professionalism, but I do think it's telling that story, it's showing that, and it's increasing, I think, the brand perception to the homeowner or the building owner of the roofing industry, and really trying to elevate that. I think it's really important. Frankly, it's part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's a really important message, but I think education, and having such a fragmented industry, it's difficult to get out there. And I think taking it on the road is not a bad idea. So.
Yeah. Yeah. We've never really, this is probably personal philosophy, so I won't say this necessarily Atlas philosophy, but I've never really believed that, anybody should go try to do somebody else's job that's doing it really, really well. Right. Like we talk about like, well, if we had $1 million in extra budget, we could go market directly to homeowners. That's not my job. That's not my place in this space to go do that. Right. I'd be competing with my own customer for that homeowner's attention. Right. They're looking for a contractor. So, we do have these conversations. That hypothetical you threw out is very real at a company like ours. But we've always said, how can we apply ideas and funds and programs to empower the person that is their wheelhouse, right? We want the contractor to win, right? So how can we help them win? That's really what drives us.
Yeah, very cool. Well, what are you working on now? What are your current projects?
Well, we are working on enhancements to our contractor programs, our pro programs. We're working on some new exclusive warranty programs, and then we're really very heavily involved in sort of technology integration and implementation. We don't want to create a closed system. Some manufacturers do this. Maybe they have the ability to do that. We want to basically go partner with the industry leaders, the best of the best, to offer the best possible solutions to our customers, right? We want to vet them out, like Eagle View or anybody, vet them out and say, here are some programs and opportunities for you guys to go and explore and see if they fit in your business. We've vetted them. We think these can help. They fit with our story, our go-to-market strategy, which if you're selling our product, there should be alignment there, and go that route. So that's really what we're focused on is expanding these pro programs. Our Platinum Contractor Conference is definitely a big thing too that we're trying to do. But unfortunately, it looks like that's going to get postponed. But we're but we're trying to rethink the way we can deliver that face to face in some different ways. So
yeah, very cool. So you're, again, very signature style. Your road shows are legendary, or maybe notorious. What are your inspirations? I always like to kind of go here with guests, because I know I'm always looking to find out what someone else is tuning into, be it a podcast or a book that they've read that made an impact. Where do you get that? Yeah, there you go. It could be Jack Daniels, whatever.
I presenting is about storytelling, but you got to get people to actually care to listen to you, right? So, you brought up the money suit and, personal style. I mean, the money suit was really just a way to get people to, look at me as somebody that they could laugh at a little bit, and, somebody that didn't take themselves too seriously. And I think that there's a lot of ways to do that, right? There's a lot of ways to, get people to take their guard down a little bit. So, some of my personal style is really all about saying, look, I'm really passionate about what I do, which is helping you. I'm really passionate about the things that we sell, right? We believe they bring value. We believe we make a product that's a quality product. I would, love to debate anybody that would disagree with that, based on some 30-year-old preconceived notion about product quality and manufacturers and all that, right? But I think at the end of the day, you've got to figure out how to tell a good story, because that's what we do in sales. We're storytellers at the end of the day. So I follow people, Robin Williams is one of my favorite people. He's one of my favorite stand-ups. He's so intense and, physical, the physicality of that. And, I love stand-up comedians. I follow a lot of these guys who, again, have that like intense physicality. And then I follow really good storytellers. I'm a big podcast listener. I love listening to stories because it helps me figure out how to, build arcs, and things like that. So, I've never been a huge reader, that's probably one of those things I think, you either are or you're not but I've, I read books occasionally, but I've always been more into sort of that, either audio or visual storytelling and trying to understand how you create those arcs, because it's that presentation that you're trying to give, right? So you want to find other really good presenters or really good storytellers to sort of hone your craft. So
yeah, and I think from the perspective of being able to get new information, ideas, synthesize new data. I heard this stat that there's 750,000 podcasts out there right now. So there's literally something out there for everyone.
Yeah.
And the percentage of people that read a lot or get their information that way it's a small minority of folks. But what's interesting is it's also more difficult to read in a lot of cases. Like you can't drive your car and crack open a book, right? You can't be mowing the lawn and maybe you could, you might cut your foot off or something. But the reality is that all of a sudden you now have all of these new channels of information to be able to to kind of bring in, which I think is pretty amazing, which is pretty cool. So
yeah, stuff like we're doing now. I think people they seek this out, right? The podcasting, whether it's visual podcasts or whether it's audio, I think people are seeking out things to gain new perspectives and hear people's stories and figure out how they align with their own worldview, right? I think at the end of the day, we're inherently sort of self-focused, right? We're human, it's our human nature, but I think if we can sort of see the path that others have gone, it really helps us understand, hey, how do I build my path with my goals, that I've got,
Well, 100% with you on that. So this is again my favorite part is the disaster zone. So you got to go and give me a good war story, man. Give me a situation you've been in that just exploded, or maybe one of your events that just went completely upside down on you. Something that we can kind of laugh at your misfortune.
We've definitely had some bad events. There's no question. When you do enough events, some of them just go unbelievably wrong. I mean, some of these are not like shock and awe stories. I'll get to one that I think is pretty hilarious, but we definitely have had these situations where you've got 300 people registered and then a hailstorm hits in Houston and you're like, well, crap, and then you got 24 people show up and you're like, what the heck are we going to do with all these lunches, right? And I think that we did actually go and actually drive lunches out to job sites. I think we took like all 12 people that were there and like, let's just go deliver lunches, and events are interesting creatures. They end up taking on a life of their own, and no one is the same. Sometimes you have these lifeless crowds that you just can't pull out anything out of, and sometimes you go and they are just whooping and hollering. And I'll tell you, like, the amazing thing I found about events, generally speaking, is what a grown man or woman will do for a stuffed animal. It is ridiculous. I mean, we have been giving out stuffed gorillas and stuffed elephants for 10, 12 years, and we bring 100 of these things to an event. And, you put yourself in this position of just becoming like a total lunatic over somebody going like, who wants a gorilla? People like tearing into each other to just get this gorilla. So that's always fun to watch. We toned that down over the years just so we didn't have any more collisions, which we did a few times. But I definitely remember going to an event in a market that we were really struggling in and didn't have a great reputation. And a lot of times your reputation in a market is because you got a rep that wasn't doing his job, or, there was a couple of claims that didn't get handled the right way, whatever. And, we were like, we've got to do one in this market, right? We've absolutely got to do an event. This was probably, this is going on 9 or 10 years ago. It was probably one of the first few years we did this. We go to this market. We knew we didn't have a great reputation, but our new rep did a really good job of getting like 50, 60 people at this, butts and seats, right? Just if we can tell you our story, right? And I remember we had this powwow beforehand, and we were like, guys, just whatever you do, we had multiple presenters. Do not open it up for questions, right? Whatever you do, just do not open it up for questions. And I think we're much more comfortable today with that because we're different, right? We've evolved into being able to sort of stand our ground and handle things, but we didn't want the room to sort of turn on us because of a question, right? And we had one presenter get up and say, all right, well, hey, this is good. Does anybody have any questions, right? It was like exactly what we said, don't do. And this guy was just anxious and waiting, right? And he stands up and he's like, I've got a question. What are you going to do about all that blah, blah, blah bullshit that you guys had, blow-offs or whatever? I don't even remember what the problem was, but it was some, chain of issues that this guy had. And we had a guy drive in from another market that was like a diehard Atlas guy. Okay. And so this guy's up there questioning, and we kind of had like a freeze moment on the stage, and all the focus stopped being on the stage and started being on the crowd, because this guy asked this question. And before we could even say anything, this contractor who drove in from out of state that loved Atlas stood up and said, why would you disrespect these guys by asking that question at this event? And these guys just started arguing and bickering in front of 60 people in this audience. And, anyway, we got it toned down. We said, hey, lunch is served. We'll answer your questions over here. But, I think be prepared. Don't lose control of the room. That's key. But we were really happy to have that guy defending us in the crowd that day. There's no question about that.
Yeah. So. Yeah, exactly. Don't ask questions, and don't feed gremlins after midnight.
Exactly.
Oh man, that's funny. I appreciate the letting us laugh at your misfortune / discomfort. It's always interesting. I always throw this out there, and I'm thinking, like, wonder what the statute of limitations is on this particular scenario. Yeah. So it's like,
there's a few logs back here. I'm like, I probably shouldn't tell that story.
There's people like thinking about, man, there's this lawyer that lives down the street. Anyhow, thanks for coming on board. Sure. Great having you. Anything you'd like to close with?
Hey, if you're not familiar with Atlas, I would just challenge you to take a peek at what we're all about. I mean, we don't claim to be, a fit for everybody. And, I think we're looking for people that just are looking for differentiation and value add. And, we're doing some great things with our Wednesday weekly webinars. We're doing our pro talks as well. But, main thing is we're out really trying to find contractors that are looking for ways to enhance their margins with a product that we know can help them make more money with our Scotchgard stories. So that's the big thing. We're really anxiously awaiting seeing how IBHS, I know you're familiar with those guys, are going to be doing their new hail and wind certified fortified homes. So Atlas Storemaster Shakes, the #1 shingle rated by IBHS for hail and impact rated shingles. So that's exciting news. So we're trying to use these types of tools to really get a conversation back to margins, right? Contractor margins. So those are things that we're really focused on. If I'm plugging anything, it's, we got to be careful not to be overly price focused in our industry. On the supply chain and the purchase price of a shingle from distribution. It's got to be also about, how we can upsell, because there's going to be a lot of dogfighting out here, I think, in the next several months here as we come out of this downturn, and there's probably a little less business than there was before for at least a period of time. There's going to be a lot of people holding on to that cash a little tighter, not wanting to invest in that roof, which is going to intensify the competition. So let's intensify it up with value as opposed to down with price. So there's my plug.
Yeah. There's no doubt that it's going to be interesting. But thanks again for coming on board. To everybody listening, check out Stan at Atlas. You can find him wherever Stans are found. LinkedIn, etc. Not a hard guy to locate. Atlas is an outstanding partner of EagleView, long time, very tech focused, very forward thinking group of folks, and just all around great people. So any comments, questions, want to be on the show? Again, I don't take complaints. Peers at riseoverrun podcast.com. See ya.
See you guys.